It's the Growing for Market podcast.
There's so many things along the way that we've abandoned, but I mean, that's in some ways, like, that's the secret sauce, is like knowing when to cut bait and move on. Like, sure, that was an idea we had. It was fun. It didn't work out. Next, right? I mean, like, that's just where we went. We bought barcodes for products that were never launched. We've done so many of these things to see what sticks. And then sometimes out of left field, something comes in and it's just like, that's what sticks. And you didn't know that's what's going to stick. But as soon as you see that it is, you got to lean into that, because you weren't even trying and it worked, which is a great sign, because a lot of times we're trying and willing it into existence and it's not working. And that's when we need to be able to move on.
Hello, and welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, where we talk about growing, marketing, and the business of growing flowers and vegetables for local markets. I'm Andrew Mefford, your host and the editor of Growing for Market magazine, proudly celebrating 35 years in 2026 as the magazine by and for vegetable and flower market farmers. If you're enjoying the podcast, just wait till you see the magazine. Go to growingformarket.com for more. Also, if you could give us a follow and a rating, it really helps other like-minded people find the podcast. And now, let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouses team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit rimmel.com to get a quote today. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till, because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing, to making raised beds with the rotary plow, to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Brian Bates to the Growing for Market podcast. Brian and his family run Bear Creek Organic Farm in Petoskey, Michigan. They grow real organic certified vegetables and honey and have an ambitious commitment to sustainability and resiliency. Also, Brian went to high school close to where I did in Northern Virginia. Now, I think of suburban Northern Virginia as an unlikely place to spawn farmers. In fact, I was thinking I might be one of the few from that area to have gone into farming. So, in addition to talking about his innovative farm, I'm also curious about how Brian even got into farming in the first place. So, without further ado, welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, Brian.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk with you because you've been on my radar screen for a while for a pod interview, partially because Growing for Market magazine founder and former editor Lynn Basinski visited your farm about a decade ago and was impressed enough with your operation that she wrote an article called From Zero to 100K in 2 years, when you were on track to break sales of 100K in your second year of farming. So Growing for Market subscribers can read that article in the archives, but I didn't link it in the show notes because from following on social media and meeting you a few years back, I know your farm has changed a lot in the last decade. So that article is probably pretty dated at this point, though it is still a good profile of your farm in the startup stage. So first, can you tell us a bit about Bear Creek Organic Farm as far as what crops you grow and where you sell them and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Well, where we sell things has evolved over the years, but our main crops have always been the same handful of crops, which would be salad greens, tomatoes, microgreens, and transplants in the spring, like vegetable and herb transplants. Those comprise the majority of our farm in terms of dollars and revenue. And then we also grow a whole smattering of other things: winter squash, cucumbers, peppers, garlic. We now grow potatoes and a handful of other vegetables, but we do not grow everything. We've never grown everything, and we never intend to grow everything. So we've always taken a more targeted approach to how and what we grow. And we've really tried to emphasize having something for as long as possible when we choose to grow it. So like spring mix, for example, we grow it in the field in the summer for sure, but we're growing it in the hoop houses in the spring and the hoop houses in the fall and the early winter, so that that season is as long as possible, for that crop.
That makes sense. And how much field space are you growing on? And I know you got a bunch of greenhouses too. Like how much greenhouse space is that also?
Yeah, it's a good question. So last year, 2025, that was our first year growing on like 6 full acres would be the full production. Before that, it was mostly 3 or 4 acres for the better part of a decade. We have just over an acre in cover. So in hoop houses and greenhouses, and we've just added a few cat tunnels last year. So we have 3 sort of benchtop greenhouses and then 7 hoop houses that we grow in the ground in. That's where the majority of the value generation comes, from those hoop houses and greenhouses, for sure.
Yeah. I think that is really smart of you not to try and grow everything, or at least concentrate on a few profitable crops. And I'll say, like, when we first started farming, I feel like we took sort of like a one of everything from the seed catalog approach, which was fun to see all the diversity of everything. But we very quickly realized there's some crops, like there's not a huge market for salsify, who knew?
As it turns out, yeah.
I want to take just a second and point that out, because I think if someone's listening to this, like thinking about starting a farm or in the early stages, I feel like what you just said is one of the best pieces of advice, is to think about what there really are markets for, and make sure crops that are also profitable, because you got to be able to sell a crop so you're making money on it and sell enough of it also. And really the things that you just mentioned, I think, are good places to start for people. Like, I think a lot of farms, tomatoes, salad mix, like microgreens, and transplants are great spring cash flow. So like those are 4, people could do a lot worse than to start with those 4 crops.
They could. And there's so much goodness in what you just called attention to. And I want to sort of just step back on my side and say, like, I'm not from a farming family. I didn't grow up on a farm, and I didn't come to our farm with a decade of experience working on farms. I've definitely worked on other farms, but, not for a terribly long time. So us choosing to grow some of these crops was not informed by us being experts in those crops, right? Like we said, okay, we're going to try and sell transplants and lettuce and tomatoes and garlic, but that doesn't mean that we had a ton of experience in those crops. A lot of it was driven by the fact that there were farms already in our community, and they were really like doing a great job on CSA model farming. And they had a ton of storage crops: carrots, beets, potatoes, rutabaga. Like they were doing that so well that Ann and I felt like we really don't want anyone to feel like we're taking away their piece of the pie. We just want the pie to grow bigger. And so we just saw a lot of opportunity in some of these fresh perishable crops. And that's worked out really well, is just to sort of find that need. And in college, I became exposed to this, but I don't know if you know the name Tom Bedard, but he launched Lady Moon Farms on the East Coast.
Oh, yeah.
And he spoke at Penn State when I was there, just in a random lecture. And he was talking about the history of Lady Moon Farm. And I was excited to go see his presentation because it said he was the largest organic farmer east of the Mississippi supplying whole foods, like of vegetables. There's other big farms, but of vegetables. And he had operations in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Florida. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's so smart. Like having operations in all three spots, he could grow like all the crops, right? And then I sit through his presentation and he talks about how, he's from New Jersey, not from a farming family. Like I'm feeling some like parallels here when I'm listening to him speak. And he talks about the genius in farming in three separate zones was not to grow three different things. It was to have the longest possible season for the same things. Like that made him so much more valuable to Whole Foods as a supplier. Like he could have kale in the winter from Florida. Then when it got too hot, kale in the early spring from Georgia. And then when it was the growing season in Pennsylvania, kale from Pennsylvania, and then reverse that on the back end so that he was always able to provide kale. And that was just this like light bulb moment. Was he was not trying to grow everything, but he was trying to have the longest season. And while we don't have farms in multiple states, I kind of view those hoop houses as letting us do that. We have it early, middle, like we always would, and late, which allows us to extend the season and be more valuable to our customers.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There's different people who put that to practice in different ways. In fact, I used to work with a farm up here in Maine that worked with a farm in Florida. And what they did is that our climate is cooler than most of the rest of the United States. And so they would grow cole crops in particular. They would grow broccoli up here in Maine in the summertime when obviously it was too hot for that in Florida. And then they would do the winter production of cole crops in Florida, and they would pack it in the same box, like very much like Lady Moon Farms. Like, yeah, I know what you mean. And so I think to the wholesalers, all they know is they're getting a box with the same label on it and same supplier, but they figured out that they're doing, the production in whatever the appropriate climate is. And obviously that's a bigger scale than most of the people who are listening to this podcast, but I think there's something there as far as almost like figuring out what your limitations are and then turning them into an advantage. Because when we originally started our farm on some family land in Pennsylvania, and we were selling into those Washington, D.C. markets. So we were in a colder climate than where some of the other farmers were based. And so we were like, okay, how do we turn this into an advantage? And we were like, okay, we'll be the broccoli people. We're like, when it's too hot for that kind of stuff in Northern Virginia, like we decided we would kind of like focus on those cooler season crops. And so I think that's smart for people to, think about what their advantages are as far as season or soils. Like if you have really acidic soil, maybe potatoes or something. I mean, that's not the biggest market farming crop, but I think the idea there is to look at what your limitations are and don't try to fight them as much as possible. Or like here in Maine, like we started our farm in Pennsylvania. It didn't work out, and we ended up moving up here to Maine. And so the first year that we were here, we got into a farmer's market, and nobody was doing season extended tomatoes. And so I'm a huge tomato nerd. And so, that's pretty much my favorite crop. And so it was easy for us we were like, well, I guess we should build some greenhouses. And so instead of trying to compete with all the people in the farmer's market that we had just gotten into, who are already doing all the salad greens and everything, we built hoop houses and greenhouses, and we became the tomato people and the cucumber people and the pepper people, and to a lesser extent, the eggplant people. But yes, that was it. So we were like, I think it was much better, and also probably, our fellow farmers market people probably liked it a lot better that we staked a claim to those, different crops than what they were already growing. So that's really good advice for almost anybody, whether they're getting started out or not. Well, okay, so you mentioned this, so I didn't realize this until I met you at the Northern Michigan Small Farms Conference, which is a great conference, by the way. People haven't been, they should check it out. But you grew up very close to where I did in Northern Virginia. Newsflash, there aren't a lot of farms left in suburban Northern Virginia. So, it's actually built up even more. So I feel like when I was growing up there, it was like strip mall land. It was like sprawled out development, all like very, like mostly single story. And that's why one of the many reasons probably why the traffic was so bad there. Since I've been back, it's interesting. So I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia. And if people know where that is, it's I'm encouraged in a way because since I've been back, it looks like they're building up. I feel like that whole area kind of like sprawled out as much as it possibly could. And I think they should have looked at multi-story development in the first place, but I think now that they've sprawled it out completely, they're starting to build up, which I think is a good thing. But I did want to ask, how did you get interested in farming coming from suburban Northern Virginia?
Yeah, it's a great question. There were no farms near us. I mean, well, Potomac Vegetable Farm, which you may know those folks. So that was,
I do.
yeah. So that was like the last functioning farm in the county, basically. And then as I grew up, they moved most of their production one county further away, but maintained the produce stand right on Route 7 there, which would be like where we would get our pumpkins and stuff like when we were younger. But I was never like shopping for a pumpkin as a kid, thinking like one day I'm going to grow that pumpkin. Like that was not a thought I ever had. It's somewhat convoluted how I wound up where I did, but I guess the shortest way to say it is that I ended up going to college at Penn State, and I went there for landscape architecture. I wanted to become an architect or landscape architect, and I really liked working outside and worked landscaping. I thought I'll become a landscape architect. And, long story short, I kind of found out that wasn't for me. I didn't really want to be on a computer all day designing outside things. I thought, maybe I could be outside doing outside things, but the architect piece requires that you're kind of on a computer. And that didn't really jive with me. So I just had a friend of my roommates stop by our dorm room during class sign up and said they found a class called Sustainable Agriculture Principles and Policy. And I was like, shoot, that's interesting. Like I was landscape architecture at the time, like edible landscaping was very trendy and this like guerrilla gardening and urban landscapes. And so that kind of spoke to me on a productive level. And so I took this ag class and my mind was blown. I had never thought about farming as a career. I'd never thought about farming. I mean, I'd never really spent a ton of time thinking about where my food came from or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the beginning of, I was just bit by this bug. I was so fascinated by all the ways that it intersected like policy and the environment and where our food comes from. And I was really fortunate. I met my wife while I was in high school. So I was in college and we knew each other. I mean, we were dating. She wasn't at Penn State with me, but we were dating and we kind of knew we wanted to, be together forever and make this future for ourselves. And so I was just always just like, we were just really motivated to make a difference in the world. That just like was something that was really driving us. And at this time, just to kind of date where we're at here in history, at this time, the like most environmental thing you could do was buy a CFL light bulb and like swap out your light bulb. Like this was like peak CFL light bulb time. And I was even in a student group on campus that was like lobbying the big bad people on campus to swap out the light bulbs for these CFLs. That was short-lived. LEDs obviously have superseded CFLs. But in any event, this desire to make a difference was really, really important to us. And I just kind of felt like, gosh, I'm not going to become like the next, engineer of renewable energy. I'm not going to develop a new electric car battery. That's not like what my skill set is. And there was a lot of argument to get into like policy work, with like the EPA and create these standards. And basically, I kind of just distilled it down to, in my life, like I wanted to have the greatest impact I could in my lifetime. But I was feeling pulled between I could do a little bit for a lot of people, or I could do a lot of bit for a few people. And so the little bit for a lot of people, maybe like draft Clean Air Act legislation or something really significant like that moves the needle for like the entire country. But it could take like a decade or more, just to hopefully pass something. And then on the flip side, I felt like, or you could get involved in like a community and entrenched in a community and really be very impactful and meaningful to that community. And you might not reach the whole country or the whole world, but you might really help take care of your corner of it. And that started to feel more plausible for us. And I knew myself well enough to know that I really like doing work and seeing the reward. Like I really like when I was a kid, I loved doing a job and getting paid for the job. Like I loved that feedback loop. And I think on terms of labor and work. I really liked this prospect of doing something and seeing the benefits of it right away. And I was concerned that if I got into policy work or advocacy or something, I might just not get those little victories. And there's other ways to do that. So obviously, as in farming, I have plenty of work. The work abounds, and there's lots of little victories and big victories. There's lots of big and little losses too, but the day to day is extremely rewarding and it's almost addictive. I could do this forever. I really don't. There's always a new dynamic and a new scene. So anyhow, that was the genesis of it. I then quickly got to work. I got a job work sharing on a local CSA farm called Tate Farm in Pennsylvania. And then I got a job on the research farm at Penn State working with that lab. And I just tried to I changed my major, immersed myself in the farm stuff. Central PA has a great food and agriculture scene. So I could go to the PASA conference and the Mid-Atlantic Veggie Growers Conference in Hershey and just kind of immerse myself in these environments and go to the farmers market and talk to growers. And so the rest is sort of history, but that was where we were bit by the bug for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Pennsylvania is a great ag state. And that's funny. I feel like there's so many little parallels between you and me because I had gone to school for journalism at Concordia University up in Montreal, Canada. And I had a friend who was very academically interested. And I was starting to get interested in farming. And he was like, you should go back to school and become a professor of sustainable ag. And I was like, I just want to do it. Actually one thing that pushed me in the direction even more of doing hands-on agriculture was starting to get entry-level journalism jobs and basically like internships and realizing I was going to spend my life in a cubicle, which is not the worst thing in the world. But for me, I realized from starting to do it, I realized it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And that's what led me more to just like apprenticing on farms and doing the applied agriculture. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free.
Hey, it's Lindsay from Grown By. There are a lot of farm sales platforms out there, but there's only one that's cooperatively owned by farmers. And that's Grown By, your all-in-one solution to simplify farm sales. I'm proud and excited to share 2 new features now available on top of the tools you already know and love. Number 1, our customizable CSA box builder. It allows your customers to simply say what they'd like in their share, and Grown By matches their preferences with your weekly harvest. Number 2, our new wholesale-only marketplace. Developed with the Culinary Institute of America, it makes your life easier with a dedicated shop for your wholesale customers. No more texting those chefs. Combining retail and wholesale inventories and records. And, drumroll, automatic payments on due dates. No more chasing down late payments. These new features sit alongside our popular online sales and traditional subscription CSA tools, making it easier than ever to manage your farm's business. As you start to get ready for next season, we'd love to hear from you and see if our cooperative can be a partner in growing your farm. Visit us at grownby.com. That's GROWNBY.com.
This episode is sponsored by Nifty Hoops. Nifty Hoops designs and builds high tunnel systems for growers who want dependable results. What stands out is that Nifty Hoops tunnels are complete systems designed by experienced builders with the details worked out ahead of time. That means the core components are included from the start, like end walls, ventilation, doors, baseboards, and double-layer poly, rather than being added later. The tunnels are designed for real wind and snow loads, efficient assembly, and long service life. You can choose a self-build kit with guidance from written manuals and videos, or a community build where Nifty Hoops works alongside you and the project gets completed in one day. Nifty Hoops has built more than 1,500 hoop houses across the country, including many funded through the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative. They're known nationwide for predictable outcomes and ongoing support. If you're planning a high tunnel project and want it done right, you can learn more at niftyhoops.com. And now, back to the show.
I can tell you, right? So my wife's an artist and she's now an art professor and an artist. And like I said, we met at like a summer art camp when I was in high school. And growing up in and around DC and the rat race that is suburban DC, I think when I came home from college, like sophomore year, and told my folks, like, I think I'm going to become a farmer. And they already knew I was like dating an artist. I think they were like, where do we go wrong? Have we taught you nothing? And I think they were pretty skeptical. I mean, I know they were very open that they were skeptical about farming. And I remember, sort of to your friend's point, I remember kind of pitching them on like, yeah, but hear me out. Like, if I just do a little farming first, then I'll like have street cred, and then I could go like become a professor, go to grad school, and then do all this stuff. But then I just skipped that and stayed with farming. But I was looking at grad school, and Ann and I were headed to go to a conference for grad school, and we were driving to the airport in Grand Rapids in Michigan when we moved up here at first. And we got about an hour and a half south of where we lived going to the airport for this conference. And we were just talking on the drive, like how much we love, like just being on the land and farming. And we just kind of looked at each other, we're like, what are we doing? Like, why am I going to a conference for grad school? And we just, on I-75, we just pulled a U-turn, drove home, never got on the plane, never looked back. And we've been doing it ever since. I mean, we were just that conviction was so strong. We just knew this is what we were meant to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe it takes being on the wrong road for a little while to figure out that you're on the wrong road.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's super fair. And I think because I didn't grow up in and around farming, I went to a lot of farm conferences. I mean, I would go to PASA, but then I started going to conferences in other areas. I went to Practical Farmers of Iowa and I forget the one in New York, the New England Fruit and Vegetable, and just trying to learn as much as I could about these different, learn as much as I could from these people who had done it. And I also think that was a fascinating way to get in, because this was before like YouTube could teach you how to do everything, right? So you had to like go travel.
Right.
I mean, I was driving, to Iowa just to sit in a room with people that anymore you could watch a YouTube video of what they're saying. But that like sitting with them and then like listening to them talk, Chris Blanchard, I signed up for his classes and wanted to learn everything I could from him. I had read his book, and just like sitting through those classes, but then also having lunch and dinner with these folks, I feel like I ended up on this like fast track of what to do and what not to do. And that would have taken a long time just trying it all myself, but I knew I needed to learn faster than I had time to learn. And so I could just be a sponge. And I remember just following Paul and Sandy Arnold wherever they went, like just like they were so knowledgeable, and they weren't even presenting. They were just attending, but everybody presenting kept pointing at them. And I'm like, okay, these people obviously know something. So like, I need to sit with them at lunch. So I just remember doing those things and making those connections and trying to learn as quickly as I could, like what to do and what not to do. And that really, like, I give so much credit to our initial journey, to those folks being so willing to share. And so my wife and I have just always felt like anything we can do to share. Farming's hard enough as it is. There's no point in trying to shut the door behind us. And so I think that's been a really powerful community to be a part of. And we're really grateful for everybody who's shown us so much.
Yeah. And it's I gotta say, the market farming community, I found it to be a very sharing community too. And I don't know, I do wonder if part of it is that none of us are trying to be like the veg corp of the whole country. You know what I mean? So, some people are more giving of their time and information than others, but generally speaking, because that's kind of what the business that I'm in, right? Is asking people about like what they're doing on their farms, like we're talking about right now. And most times when I ask people, like, would you write an article for the magazine or do a podcast interview, people are usually very sharing. And I do think there might be some of that because, like, well, I'll say, I worked in the seed industry for a while. I did research for Johnny Selected Seeds and specifically on greenhouse varieties. And it was a really different world. Like some greenhouses, like I visited a lot of like big production greenhouses. Some of them were like, take pictures, take notes, whatever you want. Some of them were like, no pictures, no notes. You come in, look with your eyes, and because they were in, some of them, the bigger the greenhouse, some of them are national. right?
Yeah.
And they know if they give away their secrets, they could be to a competitor on the other side of the country that's still impacting their business. So I'm very thankful to the whole, market farmer audience, including you, Brian, for mostly being, very forthcoming and sharing. Cause I think also most of the people who are in this business believe in it and, want market farming to succeed. That's one of the things that I thought about as I made my transition more from grower to like magazine editor, podcaster, or whatever, is that, it's like, this is market farming is something that I want to succeed. And maybe at this point, my best contribution is to, the magazine, podcast, and things like that.
I mean, there are way easier ways to make money than to run a market farm. They're like maybe every other way is easier. So I think about that too. Like no one would stick it out just for the money, so to speak. Like if you were driven solely by money or like you're saying, scaling up or whatever, there would be other realms and places and ways to do that. There's so much opportunity, but there's also so much challenge. You just have to be able to try to do everything. And so I just think that that's one reason I find a lot of people in this space are so happy to share, is like a lot of people have more demand than they could ever answer. It's like they were like, yeah, I mean, if I had more labor, maybe I would double, but I don't. So I don't. Like it's a very different outlook than other like startups that are all trying to get to 10x valuations or whatever, whatever they are trying to do. It's a totally different model.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very different business environment than most other businesses. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, I did want to ask about like on the production side of things, what your climate is like there. Cause many people are aware that Michigan is mitten shaped and you're kind of like down there at the tip, about at the middle finger. I guess you're off to the one side you're on Lake Michigan, but you're close to the tip of Michigan where it touches Canada. So it looks like zone 4, zone 5 or something like that to me, perhaps with similar temperatures to what we have here in Maine. But like, what are your first and last frost dates? And is your climate changed a lot by being right on Lake Michigan?
All good questions. So yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I did not grow up in Michigan as we talked about. And so like, I've learned a lot from being here, but it's like, I don't know if this is going to work in reverse. It's like two peninsulas, right? So like we're like up at the tip of the lower, and then there's this whole upper peninsula, which is even further north, but 90% of Michigan's population lives in 10% of the state. And that's concentrated down in like the sort of Detroit, Grand Rapids area. So then the whole rest of 90% of the land of Michigan is just 10% of the people. So there's really not that many people. So our county is about 30,000 people. Our town is about 6,000 people. To give some perspective, we're not near any major city or metro area. So I know a lot of farmers, especially out east and, Twin Cities and whatever, farm somewhere, 50 miles, 60 miles away and then bring it into a metro center. That's not what we have going on here. I mean, the largest town near us would be called Traverse City. That's an hour and a half away, and it has a ton of farms near it. Like it wouldn't make sense for us to go there. So our town is 6,000, and that's the biggest town for, I don't know, 40 miles. I mean, it's not, there are other towns of approximately that size, but there's no big town. So that's an important part of the sort of market landscape when you think about where we are. The soil is ridiculously sandy, like ice age sand, like dunes. Like there's dunes. When we were putting in the driveway for the farm, the excavator was like, "Are you sure you want a farm? Because this would make a great sand pit." And I'm like, we're still going to try, and he's like, "But this sand is so good." So that was maybe our first sign. But,
backup plan. If the farm doesn't work out, sand pit.
Right, exactly. And there is one not that far away, but still, well, so for the soil science side of things, very, very sandy, no clay, so to speak. The earth is just not black. Like it's not topsoil. There's just the farm when we started, it was, I believe our first soil test was like around 0.6 or 0.7% organic matter.
Oh,
so
yeah,
like,
that's sand.
That's sand, right? And so very, very skeptical old time farming neighbors, just being like, well, it'd be interesting to see what you can grow down there. Like just really, really skeptical. We have dumped a preposterous amount of compost and amendments on this fields in the last 13 years. And the field we've been growing on for the whole 13 years that we've been mending the entire time, like just hit like 1.6% soil organic matter.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
after like, I mean, truly like many tens of thousands of dollars of compost and organic matter. So it's very sandy. And that's one thing that I forget about because we're around it all the time. But anytime I have farmers visit from another state, I just find that we're walking between the hoop houses and I just see them just kicking the ground like in disbelief. Like they just cannot even believe it's this sandy. We've never built our kids a sandbox because they can literally just go pick a spot and play in it. So great drainage. Maybe if we were real estate agents, we would say great drainage, which is good for vegetables. And then from a zone standpoint, yeah, we're zone 5, whatever, A or B. I don't really know. Very, very cold. It can be. I find the zones kind of curious. I mean, they are determined by your maximum low temperature. It really doesn't speak to sort of the duration of your season, but just how cold it's possible for you to get. So our forecast for tomorrow night or the next night is negative 17 degrees, like without the wind chill. That's pretty cold. I would think that's similar to where you are at times.
That sounds pretty similar to the weather we're having here right now.
Yeah. And we won't, we'll end up in this stretch for maybe 30 or 40 days not getting above freezing. And that definitely happens. I mean, that definitely happens. Our first winter on the farm, we got 188 inches of snow. That's a lot, like regardless of, and then it didn't get above freezing, I think, for like 70 days straight. That was like a record setting winter. I bought like an old plow truck to keep the driveway clear. And like I called AAA to my own driveway to get my own truck out so I could go back to plowing my driveway. Like it was very, very challenging. But in any event, very cold, a lot of snow in the winter, which I see as more of a blessing from a crop standpoint and a pest control and a soil erosion. Having that snow cover very reliably is great. For instance, we don't mulch our garlic. We've never felt like we needed to because the snow always has provided insulation. So that part's really good. So close to the lake, we get the lake effect snow because we're close to the lake. There is a bit of a moderating effect of temperature, but we're inland just enough and we sit in like a bowl. So we run colder in the winter than right on the lake where we are. And then we run hotter in the summer. So in Petoskey in town, if the weather app says it's 75 in Petoskey, it's almost certainly 80 or 81 on the farm. And then in the winter, same is true. If it's like 5 degrees in Petoskey, it's probably, 0 or 1 degrees on the farm. So that's, we're like sort of plus and minus 5 degrees of whatever the in-town temperatures are. So growing season, we're kind of in that like Memorial Day to Labor Day is your guaranteed safe. We have had frost after Memorial Day, but it's rare. And then we've had frost right around Labor Day. In terms of the changing climate, we're not seeing much change in the spring growing season. It's not like we're getting a jump start on things. Because as you know, like the risk is always that you could get a jump for a stretch, but you're just one front away from getting back to freezing. So that's harder. We are seeing a longer fall without frost. And we've added an extra seeding in the field for several things like greens and lettuce, spinach and sunflowers and some of those things we grow in the field. We have added an extra planting from what we did at the beginning, knowing that there's a risk there, but also knowing that for the last handful of years, like it hasn't materialized. So that's kind of been our strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, beyond growing up a few miles away from each other, I feel like there's some other parallels between us. For example, on your website, it says that you and your wife, Anne, with an E, worked on and visited a number of farms in something like 40 states, trying to figure out where you wanted to farm. I say that because after meeting my wife, Anne, with no E, we're both married to Anne's, but yours has an E, mine doesn't. So I met my wife, Anne, on a farm in Pennsylvania. From there, we went straight out, worked on farms in California, Washington State, came back, worked in Virginia. I worked on the research farm at Virginia Tech for a season, and then we started our farm That didn't work out, went to upstate New York. And then finally, while we were working on a farm in Maine, we found the farm where we still are today. And so in that 2015 profile in Growing for Market that Lynn wrote about you, she said one of the reasons you chose a farm so far north was partially due to climate change. And after we had to leave our initial farm in Pennsylvania, we likewise decided to head north, anticipating a future with a warmer climate. And also having grown up in Northern Virginia, I knew that the pests and diseases, like the farther south you go, the pests and diseases are worse. So, I mean, it's kind of pick your poison. It's like anywhere. It's like, do you want to plow snow and fight the weather? Or do you want to fight more diseases and pests? And so yes, we very concretely said, like, in light of a warming future, let's go north, rather than south. So how do you feel about your decision to farm in Petoskey over a decade later?
We are definitely here this far north because of climate change. In college, I had coursework in this, and in Pennsylvania, I mean, all the models were focused on Pennsylvania because it was Penn State University, but a lot of that early data came out of, the department one floor above me at Penn State. And, those graphs and an inconvenient truth or whatever, like that professor was, just upstairs. So they had all these models. And what I remember, and I'm sure things have changed now, but what I can remember is that all the models for Pennsylvania at the time, they had sort of like we stop emissions today, we don't ever stop, we do a little bit better, not necessarily good, better, best, but kind of like a best, medium, worst. I don't know.
Yeah, like a range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Medium was that by 2050, Pennsylvania would have the climate of Georgia. And so Ann and I were thinking, okay, 2050, we should be, about retirement age, but still very much alive, or hopefully, and doing things. And we thought, like, we would never consciously move to Georgia. So if we agree to sort of stay around here, we're basically signing up for that. And it's very hard to move a farm. I mean, it's very hard to just like pick up and move. And so we were very cautious to make sure we picked a spot that worked. My wife's from Indiana originally, and I'm from Virginia. We both knew we weren't going to go back to where we were from. So like from the outset, we knew that wasn't in the cards. Pennsylvania was a nice place. I liked going to school there. I loved the farms there, but I didn't think I wanted to be there in 40 or 50 years, right? Like that was kind of our decision making. But something else came up in all of those models, which was that there's this climate component, but there's also a human ecological component. So there's like the science of geography and then human geography. And so all the models showed that based, through human history, like before an area became quote unquote like uninhabitable, there would be resource constraints and limitations that would drive people to extreme behaviors, whatever that is. I mean, we don't know. And water kept coming up as a limiting factor before something was like too hot to exist, so to speak.
Right.
And that mattered because Ann and I really wanted to move to Montana. For all the reasons somebody in college who wanted to move to Montana, big mountain, everything was gorgeous there. So we really wanted to move to Montana, and we just couldn't in good conscience do it. It just seemed like they would have too much drought risk. They didn't have a huge water base. So we kind of just took the latitude of where we thought we wanted to go and just looked from like Maine to North Dakota, like where are some good spots. And that's how, we found Northern Michigan. And Michigan has like all of the water, right? Like it's got like the world's largest concentration of fresh water in the entire world. So that would be great. And we knew vegetables would be water intensive. We just knew it would be the case. We knew we weren't going to be dry farming tomatoes like they can do in California. We knew we were going to need to use some water, certainly with our sandy soil. So Michigan seemed like a great candidate, but there was another piece. So that seemed like, okay, this is where we should go, is somewhere north with water. But as we talked to other growers and went to conferences and visited other farms and traveled, we started seeing this other pattern, which was that market farms, like the one we hope to have one day, really need a customer base, like a real customer base. Maybe not a ton of people, but you needed people who cared, and you needed people who would rally behind you. And so we started to see kind of two patterns for market farms. Those that existed on sort of the suburban fringe, just where land was affordable enough to start a farm, and then transport it into a city. And you see this with like the Hudson Valley into New York City, or central Pennsylvania into DC. You see this in Wisconsin, Metro Wisconsin into Chicago. Like this exists in a lot of places, this kind of like grow it here, bring it there. And then the other option was like you just kind of posted up in a town or in a community, or, that it didn't have a metro area and you were just kind of had that proximity. And having grown up in a suburban area, I really didn't like the idea that everything we did, like we could grow the best crops in the world and we were still going to be 75 minutes away from our main market. Like that didn't feel attractive to me. I talked to growers that did that. Sometimes they had the most impressive sales numbers because they were tapping into really significant markets. But I just thought, I don't think that's the journey that I want to go on. So then we looked at these towns, like being part of a town. And so in northern Michigan, like I said, there's not a lot of big towns. Petoskey's a nice town. Traverse City's a nice town. And we were looking at land between the two. So they're an hour and a half apart. So we're like, let's find land that's like 40 or 50 minutes to each spot. And then we could supply both. And in that journey of looking for land, which there's a lot of here, by the way, like there's not a ton of development pressure like there is in other areas. So looking for land was not this quest to like find something affordable. It was all kind of pretty affordable as far as land goes, in that sort of like $2,000 to $3,000 an acre, and you'd be 5 minutes outside of town. Like this was not very expensive land, but we met a realtor along the way. He was not our realtor. We didn't have a realtor. We were just looking, but we met a realtor along the way who was listing a property, and we told him what we were trying to do. And he grew up on a farm, but he didn't farm anymore. And we told him that we wanted to have a farm where we sold to the community. And he said in his previous life, he worked for a business consulting firm. It was a nationwide chain. And they had done an analysis of when businesses succeed or fail and why, and how their location corresponds to it. And one of the things he told us that we changed everything about what we did, and this is why I'm sharing this, that businesses that co-located between two hubs but weren't near any hub had a far higher rate of failure than just picking one or the other.
Huh. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that.
And the distinction here is businesses that serve customers, like not B2B, right? Like a warehousing or whatever, no big deal. That'd be fine. But where you're serving customers. And we're like, well, what do you mean? We're thinking like we can go to this county of 30,000, this county of 70,000, then we can reach 100,000 people. And he said, right. But when you're serving customers directly and you're 40 or 50 minutes away from all your customers, you're nobody's home farm. You're nobody's home business. Like you think about your hometown with a bakery or your favorite place to go get ice cream or whatever. That is, you're somebody's ice cream spot. You're somebody's bakery. You're somebody's farm. You're never going to hop in the car and go 40 minutes to that spot. Like, or you might, but you're not going to do it consistently enough for that business to succeed.
Yeah, right.
That totally changed. I told him that story. I now know him. He's a professional in our town. I told, he's, older, about the age of my grandparents. I told him like 2 years ago, I said, like that totally changed how he came to a farm dinner. And I told that story. But so we chose a spot near Petoskey. We're 3 miles from downtown Petoskey. And now when we started the farm, we had no plans to have an on-farm market. Now we do. If we were located halfway between two, there's no way that on-farm market pivot succeeds the way it has. We are near people. We are near a town. We belong here. And so that's really transformed how our operation works. So we just, I can't emphasize enough that we're in northern Michigan. We're not in a big area, but we tried to pick an area that we thought could help support what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, that's a great tip right there. If people are thinking about locating their farms, actually kind of reminds me of something when I was in the process of perhaps taking over Growing for Market from Lynn, who started it. I was like, just trying to suss out the business, and I wanted to see where all the customers were. And so we do have subscribers in all 50 states and all the territories and provinces of Canada. But I was thinking like, well, farm could be anywhere. So I thought they would be evenly distributed. But when I dug into the data, I found out that the growing for market farmers, our subscribers, were much more likely to be located close to population centers because of what you said, is that, of course, you know, it's not like commodity farming where you like put it on a truck and wave goodbye, right? Like in many cases, our readers and listeners are standing behind a table selling their wares, or depending on people either like coming out to farm for CSA pickup or dropping off CSA shares. You get it. So like that, I think what you just said is very valuable if someone's thinking about where to locate, because in principle you could put a farm anywhere that you could grow, right? But I think you'll find a much higher rate of like urban farmers, like you said, farms on the edge, right where the property values go down, so you can actually afford to buy farmland and that kind of thing. Like I think that's a great idea, is to be, you know, figure out what your market is and be close enough to it that you're not wasting a lot of time driving back and forth, unless it's a great market. Like that's actually what we were trying to do when we were farming in Pennsylvania. We were probably a little over 2 hours away from the markets. So we in fact we did the Falls Church Farmers Market for a couple of years. You know, like we got into what my growing up hometown market was, and the whole plan was kind of like, well, we were renting farmland at a very good price from my grandma at the time, but the idea was like we were living out where it was cheap, taking it into a expensive market where people also, not only do they have money, but they're also very busy. They don't have time or space to garden. So they're not, like they're hungry for the vegetables. Although gotta say, if we had done that for long enough, it might've gotten old to drive 2 hours into our market. And there are some great resources in Pennsylvania, like the Tuscarora Organic Growers Co-op. Like we had Jim Crawford, who does that co-op, if people know him. He was on the podcast in the past, and sort of like our long-term plan was to get more established and sell more through them, which is also a great idea for people to look around and see what co-ops and kinds of things they could sell to, so they don't have to be driving all those miles.
Tog has done a great job, connecting those growers. And Jim was one of those early farmers that, being in Pennsylvania, I got to learn a lot about. And, his main market was just down the road from, where I ended up going to school. And I was familiar with that. But I was also just thinking, like, grew up there. And then I was going to Penn State, and I'm listening to a guy while I'm at Penn State talk about their business. And I'm like, holy smokes, like that would be like, I mean, he wasn't as far north as Penn State, but I'm just thinking, like, I went home like once every other semester, and they were doing that every weekend. Like I was just like, that's like just a ton of miles to log. I'll tell you too, as time has gone on, there's been a handful of instances where, like big instances, there's many small instances, but there's been a handful of big instances where having that direct connection with your customer, which you lose in the sort of wholesale environment, really dug us out of a difficult spot. Like having people where like we were their farm and we hit a rough patch and we sort of said, hey, we're in a rough patch, they could then sort of rally around us because they knew us. I mean, for 6.5 years, if you bought a product from Bear Creek, it was either Ann or Brian who rang you up at the farmer's market. I mean, 52 weeks a year, we went to the market. I was the president of farmer's market, board. That was our bread and butter. That's what we did. We interacted with people. So that became a really critical piece of our business. And at the same time, we were wholesaling a lot as well. But what we found was like the wholesale could drive a lot of volume. You could move a lot of product that way, but you missed some of that human, and you'd have a human connection with the buyer, but not maybe everybody who's then buying the product afterwards. And you just get a quicker feedback loop at the market. You put together a new mix and you tell them this is a new mix, and they try the new mix, and then you get the feedback next week. How'd you like that new mix? And you get that iterative improvement feedback loop. When you put that into a wholesale channel, you don't know, like, is it not selling because it's not merchandised well? Is it not priced right? Like, you're maybe not sure. Or is it selling really well because it's merchandised too well or it's priced too cheap? I mean, you don't really know. And so we really benefited from doing both. Like, we sold more product out the back door on a truck for sure, but we were in the meantime getting this consistent feedback loop with customers that really helped us sort of fine tune our operation to be what it is now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that all makes sense. And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand acts as your business coach and assistant, helping you sell out, save time, and grow smarter. From marketing to fulfillment to customer support, Farmhand pulls real data from what's worked and what hasn't for other farms and turns it into websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that give you your time back. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/GFM and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/GFM. This episode is brought to you by Tend, the all-in-one AI-powered farm management platform trusted by modern growers. Whether you're growing vegetables, flowers, or fruit, or managing a nursery, greenhouse, or vineyard, you know how much time gets lost in planning, tracking, and staying organized. Tend helps you cut through the busy work so you can focus on growing and selling what matters. With Tend, you can plan your crops, assign and track tasks, manage inventory, and handle your sales and accounting all in one smart, easy-to-use platform. Whether you run a 1-acre farm or manage a large operation, Tend adapts to your scale and style, supporting everything from manual labor to fully mechanized workflows. Try it for free at tend.com. No credit card required. That's TEND.com. Streamline your season and grow with confidence. And now, back to the show. Can I ask you what brought on the rough patches there at the farm, and how did you reach out to your community and ask for help? Because I know that's something like CSA farms do sometimes. They might say like, yeah, we had weather or like whatever the challenge is, so we're not going to have some things that we promised you. And like I've heard of CSA farms rallying their CSA membership, but could you just talk a little bit about what the challenges were, and did you ask your community, like for support, and how did that go?
So different things over different times. Okay. But like one thing that comes to mind is, on this is sort of small potatoes, but they decided we're on a country road, and our township, instead of redoing the whole road in 1 year, one summer season, decided to do 3 1-mile chunks over 3 seasons.
Uh-huh.
It was a way, it doesn't matter. There's political reasons why they did that. That way they could be working on more people's roads at once. Everybody felt like they were getting something. But as a business, that was like 3 disruptions where there was, the road in front of our farm was like fully under construction.
Oh, for 3 years.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So it was kind of like the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of it, we didn't have an on-farm market. We just kind of had like a plant sale in the spring. And they told us, oh, no, the construction's going to be, in August, just before school goes back. And we're like, okay, phew, like we can have the plant sale. Then the next year they did it. We had like an early spring and they got a jump on it. And it was like during the plant sale. And so what am I saying? In those moments, we weren't just like a gas station on a rest stop that nobody knows those people. They're just cruising down the highway, take that exit, get gas. There's no like connection there, right? In this case, we weren't going to get any drivers by. We don't really get a lot of drivers by anyways, but we weren't going to get any drivers by. But we had an email list of our customers and we said, hey, listen, there's construction. We want you to understand, like, we're open. And I mean, a lot of businesses do this. This isn't unique to us, but just saying like, hey, we're open. You can get through the construction. Once you get here, we have everything you need. Just kind of trying to communicate and having that like connection. And again, if we didn't have that connection, it'd be harder to communicate that. Then the biggest one that sticks out the most is all of 2020. Okay. Where our business was farmers markets. And in March of 2020, it just wasn't clear what was going to happen with farmers markets. It wasn't sure, like there was lockdowns, things weren't happening. I was the president of one of the 2 farmers markets we were on at the time. I'm like, I don't know anything more than y'all know. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And so, but it's hard. You're starting seeds, you're hiring staff, like you're doing all these things and you don't know what the future holds. And so we basically decided to pivot and we sort of told all of our customers, we don't know what the future holds, but we're not going to go to the farmer's market this year. We're going to take the storage barn on our farm and we're going to turn it into a pop-up market. And we really hope you make the trek out. And at this time, nobody really had that as a habit to come visit our farm. We said, we hope you make the trek out. We're going to do everything we can to make it safe and spacing and all those things that we were doing at that time. And yeah, a lot of customers were like, I'm not going there. Like, that's like, because if we go to a market that's 25 minutes south and that customer's 20 minutes south of that market, they're like, I'm not going to drive 50 minutes to your farm to get one bag of microgreens. Like, it's nice to see you on Saturday and grab a bag, but I'm not going to drive 50 minutes. So,
yeah.
But we really tried to like build a customer, like some demand for customers there and reach out to them. And we hoped to recoup 50% of what we did at the market. Okay. So the year before at markets, we did $90,000 at the markets. We hoped if we could do $50,000, and it sounded like there might be some government relief somewhere in there. We thought if we could do $50,000, we can wholesale more because the grocery stores are going to need more stuff. Then hopefully we can just get through this year and then we'll hit the ground running next year. Well, I mean, the first couple of weeks were like, we had a baby, the baby came early. It was just like really tricky to pull it all off. And people were just very gracious and patient with us in a way that at the same time, people were like, fighting over toilet paper. And then they were like very patient at our market. So like, it was just like this nice juxtaposition. But by the end of it, by that fall, probably September timeframe, Ann and I just remember kind of looking at each other and just thinking like, we may never go back to market. Like, which was so explicitly not our plan. And I think a lot of people were just kind of like, is this always your plan? It's like, not even close, you guys, like not even close. And so that was just a case of like people rallied behind, a lot of businesses through 2020. It was a very challenging time, but a lot of people rallied behind us. And I just don't know if we didn't have that close interpersonal relationship with our customers, I don't know that it would have happened. And one of the things I've talked to with other farmers since then, other business owners since then, is if we just set up a market on our farm in year one, there's no way it's the market it is now, because we spent 6.5 years cultivating personal relationships with those customers. Things changed dramatically. And we didn't have to say, yeah, hi, new business here, come check us out. We just said, hey, we're the Ann and Brian from market. We're not going to be at the market. If you want to come over here, shop our store, we'd love to have you. And that just really changed the dynamic. And so that market, we did 90,000 the year before at farmers market. By the end of 2020, we had done $150,000 in the market on the farm. And, that was 2020. And then it just kept growing from there. We did $150,000 in the market on the farm in 2020. And then last year, 2025, we did over $1.5 million in that same building, like that same converted shed or barn.
Yeah.
So like, there's just no Bear Creek the way people know it right now if they don't support us through those journeys. And, and then we had a really catastrophic ice storm this last spring. And that was the first time we'd really like asked for help. We kind of had some times along the way where we wanted to, and we just thought, God, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. We're not really interested in trying to do that. And we had always just borrowed when we needed stuff because interest wasn't so high, but now interest was high. And so anyways, we put a call out to our customers after that, and they just rallied behind us so strongly. And it just meant a lot. It was probably one of the darkest, it was absolutely one of the darkest moments in our farm's, history. And that support just totally reignited the spark and helped us forge ahead when we needed it the most.
Mm-hmm. And what was I can imagine, but what was the impact of the ice storm?
Well, the biggest impact was just like all the like hoop houses, like the poly, and we didn't have power for a week. Some of our neighbors didn't have power for 4 weeks. This was just like a really, like they're talking about this ice storm down south right now, but like I get it, it was really, really challenging. And it had it was like the same time of year as like the COVID lockdown in 2020. It just had so many parallels. But I'll tell you, to be perfectly blunt, one of the greatest challenges was that end of March, early April, that for our operation, vegetables, nursery, plant sale, year-round farming, that end of March, early April is our most vulnerable time financially, like for cash flow. The nest egg from the year before has been drawn down. The line of credit has now been maxed out, and you're still a few weeks away from when you start seeing, I mean, for our farm, our biggest revenue month is May. So we just have to get to May. But to get to May is a lot. I mean, it's very expensive to get to May. We're running 10 greenhouses. We've got full staff in April. So that is the other piece, is there's just this like really tricky component there where like you can't afford to just wait for the insurance company and hope. Like that insurance claim wasn't settled until October. Okay. And it covered like less than a third of the documented damages. And so like, I think that's one of those things where like, without a customer base who just wants to see us keep succeeding, that's much harder to sort of navigate. So that I think is one of those cases where it really helped. But I'll tell you, there was another side effect of that was really cool. We've got a great team, great staff, really great. Everybody says that, but we really do have good staff. And everybody in our community was like suffering equally, right? Like we had a lot of staff who were like, did not have power at their home for, 10, 12, 14 days. People couldn't get out of their driveway for 10 days because there were just wires down everywhere. I mean, it was this sort of like post-apocalyptic hellscape is the best way to describe it, because what nobody had factored in was there was no fuel. There were no fueling stations. There were no gas stations that had power. There was no fuel to put in the generator if you had a generator. So like the National Guard came and they had ambulances that were just rationing fuel because they knew if they went out and they couldn't get back, like it didn't do them. So it was just this, and it got no coverage because at the same time, Arkansas and Tennessee was flooding. So like this just was not happening. My kids are still terrified of when the power goes out because of that particular moment. Like it was a very traumatizing period for a lot of people. But like for our staff who were all on these own journeys, they all of a sudden, like they felt the warmth of our customers around them. And like they felt this like extra dose of conviction and like what we're doing matters. Like people care about what we're doing at Bear Creek, and they don't just say it. They're like showing up, they're bringing chainsaws. They're doing this to help us. And I think that became this sort of like really galvanizing moment for our team. And again, I just go back to that doesn't all happen if you don't have that like connection with your customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good point. Okay. That you were able to pivot better, probably because people already knew you from the farmers market, because that's a huge change. So I was trying to do my homework on you, and I read a more recent article in Organic Grower about you saying that pre-COVID you were something like 70% wholesale, and that post-COVID it had flipped, and by 2022, I think this is what you're talking about, something like 80% of your sales were direct sales. And so can you tell us a bit about the on-farm market that became such a big part of it? I'm like, do you sell other people's stuff there too, or is it all Bear Creek in there?
Yeah, so many, like there's so much to unpack there, and I won't get into like all of it, or I'll just do as much as you want, but I can tell you. So that's true. We were 70% wholesale, 30% direct pre-COVID. Then by 2022, it had flip-flopped, 70% direct, 30% wholesale. And the wholesale was the same amount, by the way. It's just that the direct was skyrocketing. So like what used to be 70% of the pie was now 30% of the pie, but that slice was the same size. The pie just got bigger.
Okay. Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we were just not having enough crops to keep up with demand. So like then in 23, we stopped wholesaling to Traverse City. We just only kept our local wholesale accounts. And then in 24, we're like, we can't wholesale to anybody. Like we just stopped wholesaling altogether. And so 24 and 25, we've been, 100% direct. Like we sold our box truck. We don't deliver anywhere anymore. If a chef wants our stuff, we ask them to come out to the farm. We have a couple grocery stores, like small independent grocery stores that come shop our market to stock their shelves. Like we don't go anywhere. I mean, I still kind of like can't believe this. Right? Like we worked so hard to get good at wholesale to supplement the selling direct. And now we're the total opposite. 3 years ago, we bought a food truck to start making more prepared foods and have people come out to the farm and enjoy a meal. And we then we hired a chef to run the food truck and started making products from the farm. And that's a whole nother thing. Like, just like, that's awesome. And everybody thinks it's really cool. Like, farming is hard. Running food service, I think, is even harder. Like, we've never lost money faster than when we got a food truck. So like, I got a cautionary tale there, but I just think it's just been this wild transformation. And so, yes, do we sell other people's stuff? Well, we didn't. We were purists through and through. When I was the president of Farmers Market, we investigated farms that we thought were reselling at market. We were purists. And what happened was we did this market and some other vendors reached out. They're like, hey, remember us from the Farmers Market? Like, we don't live anywhere near people, and you have a market now. Like, would you consider selling our stuff? And sometimes yes, sometimes no. If they made like goat's milk soap, it's like, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like a fit. But if they were like growing organic apples and we don't have apple trees, like, that seemed like a good idea. So we just kind of naturally started adding more things. And then what happened was basically like, hey, people are coming here to get their organic vegetables. We've never been a farm that grows everything. Like, as I said at the beginning, that was never our intention. We've never done that. But like, how can we just not have carrots? Like, we don't grow carrots. But people are like, do you have any carrots? And it's like, no, we don't grow them. And after a while, you're like, this is a bad excuse for not having carrots. Like, we know a dozen people that grow carrots, and we know 4 of them grow organic carrots. Like, we should just call them up and be like, can we sell your carrots?
Yeah.
And that's now what we do. We sell a ton of carrots from other farms and a ton of these storage crops that we never specialized in because we were focused on the perishable stuff. We pick up stuff from other growers all the time, or they drop it off. So our market breakdown is probably, well, I think I misspoke when I said that market did 1.5 million last year, because it's not true. It did 2 million, because I'm doing the math backwards in my head. Of that 2 million that the market sold, 700,000 is Bear Creek product, like stuff that we grew. Okay, so 700,000 is product we grew. 300,000 is plants we grew. So it'd be like nursery plants. So that's 1 million. Then 250,000 is stuff we make and sell in the market. So like pesto with our basil, or, potato salad with our potatoes, or kale salad with our kale. That's another big portion. So that's, what is that? 1.2. Oh, and then the food truck. So the food truck does about 200,000. So like of the two, the 2.2 that enterprise is doing, we're responsible for a little over 1.5 of that 2.2. And so that other 700,000 is going to be from other producers. We have local milk and vegetables, and we have organic peaches and organic apples and organic blueberries from other farms that we buy this fruit from. But that's hard. We're like building, like Michigan, like we're really far north. None of this stuff's getting like delivered. So we just bought a refrigerated trailer. We're literally like, we sold all of our delivery infrastructure, and now we're buying like delivery infrastructure, but just to pick up. Like, we're not delivering anything. We're doing this so we can go down to a blueberry farm downstate that grows frozen blueberries. And we just picked up like 6,000 pounds and brought them back, frozen blueberries to the farm to have. We get, 30,000 pounds of apples in the fall, and we just built 2 walk-in coolers just to store those apples that we sell people. I don't know. I think we went to like 10,000 pounds of organic peaches. We're really moving a lot of this organic fruit. People really are eating it up. And that's really helped complement our product. But besides that, you got carrots, beets, rutabagas, radishes, all these sort of storage crops, cabbages, sweet potatoes, all this stuff we're selling is certified organic. It's grown by people we know, but it's not us, because we're focused on what we do, and these people are focused on what they do. And it's worked out really well. There was one local foods distributor in our area, and they went bankrupt a couple of years ago. And some of these producers who we buy from were so grateful, because that, like, for us, because that distributor was their biggest customer, and they went belly up. And at that time, we were just really starting to expand, and we could take a lot of their supply. So yeah. So now it's a whole mix of products, but every produce item we sell in the market is certified organic. There's nothing in the market that's produce that's not. And then any produce that can be grown here, we're buying it here. We have added like lemons and limes and bananas and things, avocados, but I can't believe I'm saying that. Like, that's not what we set out to do. We're like 15 months into that, but we just kind of feel like if the customers value it, they'll buy it. And if they don't, they won't, and we don't have to carry it. And so some things like citrus and avocados, they buy. Other things like grapes, they don't seem to be as excited about. So we're like, great, we don't have to deal with that. We'll just focus on what we do. So it's not a full-fledged produce department, but it's the best of what can be grown where we live, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really smart. I mean, it sounds like people are using your on-farm store kind of like a grocery store. So,
oh, yeah.
And so the more stuff you add is probably only more of an incentive, right? Because people, if people think like, oh, I can go to Bear Creek and I don't have to make a second trip, that's a win for people. Because I get it. If you're in a producer only market, you gotta make sure, like, that's an important rule for, like whatever,
right.
like whatever people, like, I get some markets are producers only, some aren't. Whatever the rules are, it's important to follow them for the cohesiveness of the market. But like, I used to work for a CSA farmer who had a pretty big CSA who would buy stuff in, and he was totally transparent about it. And he was also like, I'd rather be getting that dollar than the grocery store. And so, like, whatever people's attitude, it's great to be like, we grow everything. It's also great to buy stuff in. They're just different. They're different attitudes that just, can work. So
yeah. And if I'm ever giving a presentation, like at a conference about what we do, or to like a local garden club, or what, like if I'm ever just presenting about our farm, I usually just, like, the beginning of my presentation is usually just like a picture of our cats, because everybody likes those. Then like a quick map of where we are so people understand. Then
frickin' frack.
Frickin' frack, right?
Your cat.
Yeah. And then, one slide talking about what we do, just like hoop houses, how many employees we have, etc. And then the very next slide every time is just, we unapologetically run a customer driven farm. Like, we listen to what the customers say and we watch what they do. We listen to what they tell us, and then we watch what they do. We look at what they're buying. They might say they love this and then they don't buy it. We look at what they say and then what they do. And then our job is to thread that needle and have all the things that we can to serve them. And so if our customers thought that selling avocados was impure and tainted the experience, then they would tell us that and they would not buy them. And we kind of hoped that's what would happen, because then we don't have to deal with it. But that's not what happened. Some people were kind of like, well, I don't know. And then people just bought them. And then they said that they were grateful that we had them, and then they bought them. And so they said it and they did it. So then we are going to keep doing it. Like, we already believe we have the best job in the world. We get to be organic market farmers in a beautiful place. Like, we already have the best job. Our customers are the ones who let us keep having that job. So anything we can do to serve them becomes really important. And that becomes really important in that we need really good people in the field to grow really good crops. We also really need good people in the market to make sure that experience is really positive, to make sure that they're getting a full, authentic farm experience, that we're not, we need to, when they ask us about a crop or growing their tomato plant, we need to have a good answer for them. If they want to go to Lowe's or Home Depot into the garden center and ask them and get a blank stare, they can do that whenever they want. They need to get the full enchilada when they come to Bear Creek. And so that's become a really big part of what we do, is almost sort of be ambassadors for our cause as much as we are just doing what we do every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Like, my guess is a lot of people eat bananas and avocados, and those things aren't even the worst as far as they come from a long way away, but they're very shelf stable. Like, you see those old timey pictures, like there's this picture of like the little town that we live north of with the like old timey shopkeepers with the like bands on their sleeves and everything, and a big, huge like thing of bananas hanging out front, because stuff like bananas and avocados, they come from far away, but they don't need to be on an airplane. They could be on ships because they're ripen slowly and have thick skins. So the proof is in the pudding, right? It's like your customers, like you said, you're paying attention to them. If they all said they weren't gonna, patronize you because you're tainted with an avocado or banana, you'd find out and you could change it. But yeah, my guess is probably a lot of people who like to buy your local vegetables also make guacamole from time to time, and are probably happy to give you the money for the avocados, more so than the grocery store. So
yeah, they are, and we're produce pros, right? Like, we're sorting that stuff. We're making the bad ones disappear. We have 5 different walk-in coolers at different temperature zones. So we can ripen out those avocados so they don't go from like 0 to 100, right? Like we are experts in our field. And so we can keep these things in a way that helps them maintain their quality and you have a better experience. And whether they know consciously or subconsciously, or they don't know at all that we're doing that, they know the resulting product is better. And so that's something else that I think we take great pride in is, during tomato season, we have a climate controlled tomato room. During squash season, we have a squash room. All the while we have refrigeration for different zones. And in a produce department in a store, they're just throwing all that in one cooler and then putting it out for people to pick over. There's a lot more care and attention and intention in what we're doing. And I think that people can they can feel that and they can taste the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember when I met you at the Northern Michigan Small Farms Conference, you told me a funny story about how your first business plan was rejected by the bank, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
And, obviously you've gone on to be successful. And I forget most of that story. So if this doesn't apply, we can skip it. But I remember, whatever it was, I thought it was funny and also maybe like a teachable moment. Yeah, can you tell us what your first business plan was and why the bank rejected it, and if the rejection changed what you ended up doing, or did you just continue with the plan and figure out how to finance it otherwise?
Andrew, I don't know if we would have the business we have today if we didn't get rejected. I think they were wrong to do it. And by the way, it wasn't even the bank, right? We couldn't get squat from a bank. This was from FSA, who is considered the lender of last resort, right? So to be eligible for FSA, you have to prove that you can't get lending from a financial institution. And don't worry, as a beginning farmer, that's a slam dunk.
We've been rejected by all the banks.
Yeah.
Hi, FSA.
Right. So that's the easy part. And this was a brand new program, the Beginning Farmer Microloan Program. It was $35,000 that you could get, 7-year loan term, $35,000. And we thought, oh, this would be perfect, right? We can get a used tractor. I mean, it was like the 2013 or 14. So at the time you could get a used tractor and a hoop house, and some beekeeping equipment were the main things we wanted. It was a greenhouse. We were going to get a Rimmel Nor'easter 30 by 72, a used tractor with some implements and some beekeeping equipment. I think nowadays that loan would get you like the Rimmel unassembled, right? Like it's, things have gone up quite a bit.
Yeah. Things are so much more expensive than they used to be.
It's crazy. But in any event, the short version of that is, I guess the one key takeaway is like, know your stuff, like know what you're trying to do, but also listen to what they're saying. Okay. And I mean, I can still remember like the bench I sat down on to take the call when they called me. It's seared in my memory when we were denied this, because we just thought, I mean, it's the lowest possible amount FSA would loan. Like we just didn't think it would be, we didn't think it was a slam dunk, but we also thought like, we've got a decent plan. I mean, you don't give a plan if you don't think it's a good plan. So like we thought our plan was pretty good.
Yeah.
What happened was we are in what you would consider like this market farming space is a bit of like a specialty crop space. Like when we grow a tomato on a market farm and sell it to a customer, you're going to get $3, $4, $5 a pound for that tomato. You are not going to wholesale it in flats to a distributor for, 95 cents a pound or what have you.
Right.
Basically, Michigan, which is the second most agriculturally diverse state in the country behind California, has very different areas of growing. The middle of the state does a lot of cash crops. The hugging Lake Michigan does a lot of fruit crops and things of that nature with the warmer climates. There's just a lot of different agriculture in Michigan. And FSA offices, I mean, they're humans too. There was a massive spring freeze the year prior. The offices nearby, Northwest Michigan, which had worked with, wine grape growers, cherry growers, apple growers, hops growers, those offices were just inundated with disaster claims. Like everybody lost their entire crop. So they had a backlog a mile long. So they rerouted our application to a mid-state office, a different county that was just all row crops. And that FSA agent is reviewing our loan because that's where we got filtered to. And he says, hey, yeah, I can't in good conscience approve this loan. And we're like, what? What do you mean? And he's like, yeah, you have a plan together and projections, but you're talking about selling honey at like $10 a pound. And I went and checked Meyer and it's like $3 a pound there. And you're talking about selling garlic for like $1 or $2 a bulb and it's 50 cents at the store. So I took your projections and I just replaced them with the prices that, are more realistic. And all of a sudden you don't make any money at all. Like you're in the red, you're in real rough shape. And we're like, oh my God, but dude, we're not gonna sell it to Meyer. Like this is a different product. And he's like, you're selling honey, right? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, it's $3 a pound. I just checked. And this is one of those things, right? Like he's coming from a commodity space. He's coming from growers in his district are, corn, soy, wheat, alfalfa again and again and again. And there's a going rate and it's just a matter of managing your expenses and whatever. Like that's all that it is.
Yeah.
And you're not understanding like the value add of like local raw honey, like sold at a farmer's market, which it's not just that we're fleecing people. There's more to it. It's not coming from China. We have to stand behind the table to sell it. I mean, there's a lot more embedded cost. So in any event, yeah, denied, right? And like, better luck next year, sport. I mean, like it was not like, let me help you, it was just like, so we were like left with, sort of our tail between our legs and we're pretty disappointed. And we just had to wait. We had to wait until they were done processing the fruit loss claims at our local office. And then that was like later fall. So that season came and went. We didn't, buy the stuff. And we met with our local office, the loan officer at the time. Oh, he's still there actually. And he says, yeah, it sounds like it looks like you guys got denied. And we're like, yeah, we did. And he was like, can you tell me what happened? And we explained it to him. And he was like, guys, I'm real sorry. He's like, there's a bunch of us that do this work. Everyone's trying to do their best. I came from a dairy farm and now I write loans for wine grape growers and apple orchards and cherry orchards. And it's such a different space than like what a lot of us grew up with. And he's like, but I've learned I don't have to believe that I could sell that honey for $10, but if you do, that's your job. Our job is to equip you with the tools to try to execute your plan, and your job is to execute. He was like, that's the goal. He's like, I know local purveyors who are selling honey for more than that. I've seen garlic at the farmer's market. He was like, I'm going to trust that you guys did your homework and I think you can do this. So then he did it. And then the government shut down and we didn't get the money for like another month. But we didn't have another choice. This was our only way to get this funding. And he then became such a resource because we did get the money from him. We did make things happen. We had to report our sales at the end of the year. It was better than we said it was going to be. Then they changed the microloan program from 35 to 50. He reached out and said, hey, they just upped it to 50. You're in year one of your 7-year repayment. But if you want to borrow the balance to get up to 50 and you need another 15 or 18,000, you guys can do that. And I'd be happy to help. So then we do it. And then we get, more equipment. Then we pay that off early because we want to do something else. Then he says, I'm not going to approve another loan until you get a line of credit. And we're like, well, we don't know how to get a line of credit. And he was like, I'll connect you with Greenstone. They can get you a line of credit. And things just really started going from there. And then we said to him, we were 4 or 5 years in and we said, hey, we're thinking about starting a family. We'd like to build a house on the farm. And then we said, we talked to some other growers who did this loan program with you guys where they built a house on their farm. And, it's up to $400,000. And he was like, can I meet with you on the farm? And I said, sure. So he drove out to the farm. Again, he doesn't need to do this, but really helpful. He comes out to the farm and he says, all right, explain this to me again. You think that the farm is growing and you want to grow your family. So you want to build a house because we lived in our washback. I guess the important detail here. We had one building. We lived in our washback. So the washback was 2/3. The house was the other third. So key detail. And we said, yeah, we want to get out of the farm's way. We want to start a family, closer to the woods, whatever. And he said, I hear you. He's like, you guys are growing really well, but I'm going to challenge your assertion that you need to build a house so the farm can grow. He's like, because if you think the farm can grow, then you should borrow this money to grow your farm and then come back to me later and build your house. And I was like, oh, okay. but like we want a house, right? Like we're trying to build a house. And he said,
we want to not live in the packing shed anymore.
right. And he's like, no, I get it. But he's like, if you borrow $400,000 from us and then you build your house, you don't have any new income. You built a house, but you have no new revenue. You did nothing to boost your revenue. If you borrow $400,000 from us and you expand your greenhouse and your processing facility and your equipment and your ability to expand your team and you do all of that, then you could come back to me in 2 years and have a business that's twice this size. And then you could leverage all of the assets of the business and then build your house. And he's like, and then you would have more revenue. Mm-hmm. Now, let me tell you, my wife, who is one of the kindest humans in the world, did not like that answer because she was ready to nest and make a family. And I was right there with her and he's laying it out like ABC 1, 2, 3. And I got to tell you though, he was dead right. I mean, dead right. We borrowed the full 400,000. We built 3 hoop houses, 2 greenhouses, doubled our wash pack. And we did all of this in 2018 and 2019. We had our son. We still lived in the wash pack. And then COVID came around and we had more greenhouse infrastructure and more processing infrastructure. Everyone wanted to become a gardener. The first year we used all those new greenhouses was the spring of 2020. And the plant sale, grew by $100,000. The business, flourished. And we were only able to do it. We were able to set up a contact-free pickup zone in the new, receiving area we built. I mean, everything sort of started coming together. Then we got pregnant with our second. We were still living in the wash pack. Okay, we had 3 indoor cats, 2 dogs, and now we're pregnant with our second kid. It's getting crowded. Okay, it's like 1,100 square feet. It's getting cramped. Short commute, but it's getting tight. But we were like, we need to build a house. And long story longer, basically, the business we came to them with to build a house was more than twice the size of the business when we went to him the first time. And I mean, he was dead right. And then we saw at that time, that the business was growing and we saw what was taking place. And we thought, okay, we're on a different trajectory. So we actually put our house further away than we initially planned. Because when we first talked to him, there was no on-farm market. By the time we built a house, we had people coming here 6 days a week. So we put our house further away from where the customers are. And so we lived in our wash pack for 10 years. We lived there for 10 years before we moved out. But in that time, we grew the business very, very significantly. And that's been really advantageous.
Yeah, that's probably a long time to be in that wash pack, but it sounds like it was paid off in the long run.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Plant sales were amazing in 2020. I remember that.
Yeah, the problem was like you didn't know if it was going to sustain. Like when you're planning for 21 or 22, you're like, well, I don't know if we're going to match that. Like, everybody and their brother wanted to be a gardener. So it's really evolved and we're really grateful for where things have taken us. And we've now graduated from FSA. Greenstone acquired all of our loans from them and we do everything that's our I don't know what it's called Maine, but that's our sort of ag credit lender. But that's become a really fruitful relationship. And now we don't work with FSA on anything, but once every couple of years, that loan officer will still stop by or reach out. And he's just incredibly proud of what we've accomplished. And we tell them like it's so much of this is to your counsel along the way. And we don't take that for granted, not even a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. Yeah. Sounds like you guys did really well and it probably outgrew the FSA program. So that's what it's supposed to do, right? So you're off and running.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been talking for a long time. There's one thing I want to make sure and ask you about is like in the article that Lynn wrote about you talk about microgreens helping to offset the cost of heating greenhouses early in the season. And I think that could be a really important point for people. So will you tell us about your microgreens production cycle? Like you don't have to go into the whole like nitty gritty of how you do it, but mainly like, is it basically like, I'm assuming you mean when you're firing up the greenhouses for other things, you realize you can throw the microgreens in there. Whereas even a tomato plant, it's going to be a couple months before you can sell it to a plant. To pick a ripe tomato, it's even longer, right? So I'm imagining for firing up those greenhouses, the microgreens are quicker, some quicker income. So can you talk, like, do you do that year round and just like,
yeah,
don't have to do every detail of microgreens production, but mostly I'm looking at thinking about like the cropping cycle.
Yeah, so that's a great point. that is dated now, right? I mean, that was a long time ago. We did not grow year round at that time in the greenhouse. We grew year round in the hoops, but we didn't heat a greenhouse year round. And so that was a way, if we wanted to start tomatoes early, we could get that revenue right out of the gate. We now grow microgreens 52 weeks a year. We heat the greenhouse year round. And there's times of the year where we're heating the greenhouse just for microgreens. It's sort of like the opposite. But yeah, I thought that was a really effective way to grow them. We're not like near like super fancy chefs or like really uppity restaurants or whatever. So when microgreens kind of came on the scene for market farmers, it wasn't something we immediately jumped at because we just didn't know that there would really be a market. And we were visiting my wife's folks in Wisconsin, and we were at a winter farmers market, and there were a bunch of growers that had microgreens just at the market. And we thought, like they're just selling these to people, like not to fancy chefs, just to people. And Anne, of course, was quick to remind me. She's like, that's what I said. Like, you know, like I don't know why you're presenting this like some light bulb moment. Like, this is what I was saying. So anyways, you know, I learned a new idea. She reminded me she already had the idea. So that meant it was an idea. And we did it. And that became a really interesting part of our business because I don't think we make very much money on microgreens. In fact, I reasonably know that we don't make very much money on microgreens, but it's always just played another role in our business. So like when it was helping offset the cost of propane at the beginning of the season, that was helping getting some cash flow going. Then when we did farmers markets 52 weeks a year. Even with hoop houses, you could only get the spring mix or the spinach so long into the winter, or it was frozen. We didn't have heaters, so it was too cold. We couldn't harvest it, you know, whatever. So and then that became our mainstay. Like in the winter farmers markets, we would be the only grower in our region that had anything green, like any fresh greens. And most of the time it could be kale or spinach or something, but sometimes it was just microgreens. And then eventually we were like, you know what? It's a lot more consistent to rely on those. So we just started having them all year long. And especially in the winter, like it was a greens option, but because we were selling them straight to the customer, like we weren't getting the high exciting prices we'd heard about, right? Like we weren't able to charge, you know, $5 an ounce or whatever, right? Like we're saying basically like, we're out of our spring mix that was $4 a bag. So here's some microgreens that's like $7 a bag. And yeah, like that bag should probably be like 15, but like we're just kind of hoping you keep coming and we don't lose you as a customer. So then it became like a really important customer retention strategy. And now we do it year round, and it's still like, you know, it's been very cold right now. We just finished spring mix last Friday. We're in a little bit of a lull before like the February spinach really kicks in. And so we have kale and microgreens are kind of like the two things in our market for fresh greens, but it's nice to have a full door microgreens. So I'd say for micros, you know, depending on the year, it's somewhere between like $80,000 and $100,000 a year. So maybe in that like $2,000 a week ish. So it's not a huge driver on any given week, but it is sort of a slow and steady wins the race kind of a deal. So yeah, that's kind of the role it plays for us. We're not getting huge. We are going to probably have to raise our price. Cause I mean, like our 2-ounce packs at the store, like $4.40 or $4.99, like in our market, and 2-ounce local non-organic microgreens at our co-op are like $9, $9.40. I think that's pretty high myself, but yeah, I mean, maybe ours should be like $5.50. I don't know. You know, yeah. So it's an important product for us, and and they're healthy, and there's all that kind of stuff. But there again, remember I said we're a customer driven farm? We thought that the nutritiousness of the microgreens would be a real selling point. And as it's turned out, listening to what the customers say and then watching what they do, the big selling point for microgreens we learned very quickly was convenience. This was a convenience food. This was I'm a busy, I got a busy family and kids, and we were throwing dinner together. It's like, shoot, I forgot to make a salad, put microgreens on the sandwich, right? Like it became like this like quick dose of green on a dish that didn't have it. And it's not just like a fancy garnish at a restaurant. It's like, hey, you know what? Let's have, you know, a salmon burger. Let's put a layer of microgreens in that burger, you know, so it's just kind of helped enhance people's meals and add some green to their diet. But that convenience factor became what really motivated people. So we changed our whole kind of like pitch when they said, "Oh, what's this?" We're like, "Oh, it's super easy. They're already ready to go. Just you're making a meal, sprinkle some on, great flavor, great for you." And so that no need to chop it or wash it or cut it, like it's just ready to go. So the convenience became a really big selling point beyond just the nutrition.
Yeah, convenience is a big factor, I think, for people. So that makes sense. Yeah, because I remember a time when microgreens were like, the idea was that you're selling them to chefs for garnish. And then like I heard about people having luck selling microgreens direct to the public, and that that changed my paradigm for microgreens. And I realize now that's probably old news now. That was probably
Yeah, but a lot changed in 2020. Like we were probably peak microgreen in 2020. At that time, we were actually selling to a distributor who was taking them down state to Detroit, and we were really wholesaling them quite a bit. But one thing we found was the more microgreens we were growing, the faster we were losing money. They're very perishable. It was not the thing to bet big on. Like if you grew 200 trays and then only had a market for 100, like that was 100 wasted. Whereas if you grew, 200 feet of potatoes and only had a market for 100, you could sell the other 100 feet of potatoes like next week or the week after. And so it was a hard one to dial in, and COVID really took a toll on the restaurant sector. So what few fancy restaurants we did sell to, we sold a lot of edible flowers at that time too. Those were kind of the first things to go. If they're making up meals to go or just trying to cut costs where they can, they're going to ditch the garnish before they ditch the main part of the plate.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. One other thing that I want to ask you about quickly, because I know we've been talking for a long time, but I was curious. A couple weeks ago, you posted on Instagram, we are seeding our first spring mix of the season while still harvesting spring mix in the hoop house. This is great progress. Were there production challenges that you had to overcome to start? Like, I think what you're trying to do is be year round, or as close to year round. It sounds like you're very close to being year round on spring mix. So sounds like you're making progress there. Was it progress on production challenges, or what changed so that you could start offering spring mix either year round or almost year round?
Yeah. The spring mix is like our vanilla ice cream. Like it's the thing we sell the most of. It's the thing people come here the most often for. If they're checking out and there's one Bear Creek product in it, it's most likely to be our spring mix. So we also have noticed a pattern of like when we run out of spring mix for the season, like our customer traffic at the market drops, right? Like there's a certain contingent of people that are like just coming to get spring mix, and maybe they add some other things. But like once we don't have that kind of hook, they're like, all right, I'll catch you again when you have it. That's a key piece for us. So we've been on an ongoing quest to extend the season as much as possible. I have really legitimate concerns that that's not, for our operation at this moment in time, not super feasible. Mainly, it seems like the cost to keep them alive can be high. Like even when we're just heating it to like 30 degrees or 25 degrees, when it's -10 out, you're still burning a lot of heat just to keep them alive. The other thing we've noticed is like, you're not getting any growth. Like they're just kind of gradually losing quality, right? Like even the spring mix we're harvesting, because it's all Salanova, I should clarify, everything we're growing is Salanova. So even the Salanova we're harvesting in January was still seeded in August, transplanted in September. So it's like you're just kind of holding it in suspension. And so, yeah, you seed it in August, transplant September, it's growing October. It's probably, mostly full size before the Persephone period. So you're trying to get about 90% size by that first week in November. But you probably are at like peak spring mix in like mid to late November. And then those heads are just gradually like just succumbing. I mean, they're clinging on for dear life. It's cold, and small plants withstand cold better than big plants. So you have like the biggest possible head going into the coldest and darkest time. We battle powdery mildew. Any kind of like worm might work its way into a warm hoop house instead of being outside. There could be rabbits. I mean, whatever, like everything's trying to, like, as resources become fewer and fewer, like everything wants those last leaves of lettuce. And so, yeah, what we're finding is that we may just need to, and we've been doing things to stretch it out. Like, how far can we have it? But we might just need to rethink that and think, Maybe we just have spring mix. We can consistently get through Christmas. Maybe that's the goal. And then maybe we'll try to get a little earlier in April rather than drag it out, later. And then can we double down on spinach? Because in the summer we don't grow spinach like a lot of market gardeners. It's too hot. And we just tell customers, sorry, we don't have spinach. It's too hot. Maybe we just need to flip flop the roles. Maybe for the 3 months of summer, we don't have spinach. We just say, hey, we don't have spinach. It's too hot. And maybe for the 3 months we don't have spring mix, we say, hey, we don't have spring mix. It's too cold, but we got all the spinach, right? So we're thinking maybe we kind of invert that, but we know it's a really popular one for our customers. So we're trying to kind of ease them into the idea that we don't have it. Cause yeah, it germinated, but we know it's going to be 3 months before there's a harvestable leaf of spring mix for people to have.
Yeah, right. At that deep winter, you're kind of using that hoop house as or I guess it's a greenhouse as a refrigerator at that point, just kind of holding it.
That's the challenge. And I think we could spray to combat the powdery mildew. We could spray for the mildew. We don't, but we could do other things. We could keep it warmer, but each of those things that we're doing is adding more costs. And we're kind of concerned that by adding more of this and more of that, and you're kind of adding more costs for gradually fewer pounds of premium lettuce. And that lettuce was probably more premium in early December than it is in late January. And it's not like we're charging double. So you might just want to get it earlier. But this is where we run a customer driven farm. So anything we could do to extend it, we're willing to try. But there are still limitations in terms of what we can achieve.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing is that people will want to eat a salad any time of the year, and it's a draw if you can produce it. Although, yeah, in the very cold areas, you may just have to pencil it out. You may find that the numbers, it doesn't make sense to produce it, 365 days of the year, maybe close, but all right. Sounds like you're getting really close.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of math that people need to be doing, making sure even if their customers like it, obviously, if it's not profitable, I don't know, I guess you could either look at it as a lost leader for a short while to keep your customers coming back, particularly if you're doing a farmer's market, or I guess you want them to be in the routine of coming to your farm store as well, or just say like you said, it's too cold, there's going to be a while we're just not going to have it.
We used to close the market in the winter for January and February. And the last couple of years we've stayed open. And what you just said is exactly why. Why break the routine? Why let them go check out another market, another grocery store for those 2 months when we can keep them coming here, right? And so we just found that we were working so hard to claw them back in March and April and May to be like, hey, come on back. We're open again. But it's they didn't stop eating for 2 months. So they found a new place to get their avocados and to get their spring mix and to get their local milk. They were still finding it. So that's one of the reasons we kind of penciled it out to say, we need to stay open, not because we're going to make a bunch of money in January or February, but we should see the real gains in March and April, where we're not starting from zero and trying to get everybody to rebuild their routines to come to us. That's a really important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, then that's good to know for people who might want to start a farm store or think about the scheduling for their farm store.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, Brian, we've been talking for a good long time. I've really had a blast hearing about how your farm has changed over the years, but that's pretty much the questions that I made for you. Is there anything else I should have asked you about or that you'd like to say before we let you go?
I don't think so. There's so many different facets to our farm. There could be different angles, but I really think our 10-year plan, when we started that original business plan, our 10-year plan was that by year 5, I could go full time on the farm. By year 10, Ann could go full time on the farm. And we hoped we'd make $150,000 by year 10, for the farm revenue. That was our goal. At the time, we didn't intend to have children. We never planned to have employees just because working on other farms, we're who's going to want to do this? So it was a different time. It was a 10-year plan. It was a plan. Plans change, but it is not lost on us that we've really tried not to get too fixated on what we planned and really tried to be open to the pivots of where our customers are taking us. And I think that's, to me, like one of the most important things that we can convey to other growers, business owners, aspiring farmers, is just that, like, if my favorite crop was kohlrabi, and it is not, but if it were, it really doesn't matter in the scheme of the world that I like growing it a lot if nobody wants to buy it.
Yeah.
And that sounds kind of harsh. And when I was in college and working on farm business plans, I mean, Ann and I had a plan where we were going to be a full calorie CSA and have horses and no tractors. Like
Essex Farm.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
And here's another Penn State guy, right? He was Penn State. My professors were like, "You really remind me of." Why am I blanking on his name?
Mark Kimball.
That's it, Mark Kimball, right?
He was on the pod a while back. If people want to go look for that episode, yeah.
Okay. But I remember, like, one of my professors was like, "Man, you remind me of Mark," and he worked at Tate Farm, which was the farm that I worked on off campus. And then I met him at a conference, and I was like, "Oh, I love this guy's energy. Like, this is amazing." And then I saw him like present about his full calorie CSA, no tractors, and I was just like, "Oh, I do not want to do that." Like, I was like, that is not, like, count me out. You know, I mean, good, like, really impressed for them, but like, I'm just like, I cannot withstand that. So
it's intense.
It's intense. It's crazy. And so that was just one of these first of many moments of, like, learning who we are and what motivates us and how we do it, and, like, listening to our customers. But to just understand that, like, we want to have a farm that people enjoy what we grow. And if we love growing kohlrabi and they don't love kohlrabi, then we need to have the courage to just say, you know what, we're not going to be able to grow kohlrabi. Like, that's not what's going to let us keep having this job. And so that is something we've been very sort of flexible with as time has gone on. And I just think listening to our customers, listening to our lenders, listening to the people along the way who, you know, with what they have to say, and then taking into account what we want to do, how we want our life to look. I think that's really what's helped us get to where we are without, like, driving ourselves, you know, insane. I mean, Richard Wiswall's book, The Organic Farmer's Business Handbook, really helped shape how we thought about things. And there's an exercise in the beginning of that book about what you want out of life. And so my wife and I both did that exercise, and we tried to understand what it is we want out of life, if, you know, more than farming and things like that. And I just think it's been a great gift that we've gotten to do this together, because it's our farm. And I think that's important, that we know it's ours and that we can navigate how the waters change as time goes on. But, like, this is something that, you know, we're trying to build to exist for a long time. So that's certainly our goal, is to establish a business that really helps our community, because that's what got us into this in the first place. And we don't want to lose sight of that. You know, we didn't get into this because we're obsessed with growing kohlrabi. We got into this because we wanted to create a big impact in a community to try to leave our corner of the world better than how we found it. And so the way we can do that is by interacting with our community and listening to what they need. And if we're doing it right, they'll keep showing up.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing it right. I mean, if anything, I think that's like a nice note to end on, because it seems like what I'm seeing is that you guys had a really good business plan. Like, you guys definitely had a more concrete business plan than we did when we started our farm, but we're also flexible enough to change it when conditions dictated, right? That's that old saying about, like, no plan survives contact with the enemy, which there's probably a better and less belligerent way to say that, because I think that's a quote from a German general or something. But the point stands of that, like, you know, you got to have a plan, but you also got to be open, like, look at reality when your plan isn't going to plan to pivot. I mean, sometimes I think farmers are, it's like, that's like what we do, is pivot, right? Is you make a plan, and the weather's different, you pivot, or there's COVID or whatever. So I think you guys are, like, a really great example of that, of having a plan and then pivoting when reality strikes. So, I
mean, when I present this all to you this way in 2026, it really makes it look like we had our act together. Okay. But I mean, like, there's a large graveyard of ideas that have been abandoned. And So, we kind of forget about those, but sometimes we'll be doing something and it'll be like, remember when we thought, this is true. We thought 50% of our business was going to be honey sales. It's now less than half of 1% of our business. Okay. Like, we bought website domains for businesses we were sure were going to succeed that never were developed. We thought we were going to ship honey across the country. We wanted to be a seed garlic provider for organic growers. There are so many different ideas. Greens was just going to be our cash flow while we got the garlic and honey enterprises off the ground. There's so many things along the way that we've abandoned, but that's in some ways, like, that's the secret sauce, is like knowing when to cut bait and move on. Like, sure, that was an idea we had. It was fun. It didn't work out. Next, right? That's just where we went. We bought barcodes for products that were never launched. We've done so many of these things to see what sticks. And then sometimes out of left field, something comes in and it's just like, that's what sticks. And you didn't know that's what's going to stick. But as soon as you see that it is, you got to lean into that because you weren't even trying and it worked, which is a great sign, because a lot of times we're trying and willing it into existence and it's not working. And that's when we need to be able to move on.
Yeah. I think that's what farming's about, is to like surviving, it's like cash flow enough so that you survive to the next year, so that I know what you mean. Like it's probably sounds a lot more sort of like organized or something. Like, look, when you're looking back, like, the last decade, this is how it went. And, to realize that there were lots of moments, where you were maybe like, they're ripping up our road for 3 years in a row. Like, there's all these moments where at the moment you may not have known how it's going to turn out. But I think the point is that you're still here. And it forms a narrative. Like looking back over it, you can tell us how you got from point A to point B to point C. And that's part of the interesting thing, of agriculture, but of talking to you, is that hearing about, like, we thought it was going to go this way, but surprise, it went the other way. And this is how we survived in spite of it. So
yeah.
It can be really easy to like look back on stuff and be like, oh yes, that's what we did. So I appreciate you, like talking about all those pivots, because that's the reality, right? If somebody is thinking about starting a farm or new to farming, like weather, pests, diseases, customers, pandemics, government shutdowns, right? There's going to be curveballs. It's not going to be clear what they are probably until they hit you in the face. But, having some savings, having a backup plan is probably all the stuff you've talked about is all important for surviving when you get hit in the face with a curveball.
We call those off ramps. So like anything we're doing, we're like, what's the off ramp if it doesn't work? And one of our biggest, we have a couple mantras that really guide the farm. One of them is control the controllables. There's so many things we can't. What can we? We can be a decent employer. We can be respectful to our customers. We can project positivity. We can do those things. There's many things we cannot do, but we can do those. And, one of the other things we really try to do is just to be a little bit better every day. At this point, we're thousands of days into this journey. So that's thousands of chances to be a little bit better. But we'll go back to some old photos and be like, oh man, we really thought we were doing it. But if we knew then what we know now, but that's important to acknowledge, is like, hey, we don't have to get to 2026 in 2016. We just need to make sure that for the 3,650 days between 2016 and 2026, we get a little bit better every day. We're going to wake up one day and be like, wow, look at what this has become. But just understanding that it didn't get there in a day, and it wasn't even all planned, but we had to like zoom out to make sure what we're doing has meaning and purpose and fuels our fire, and zoom in to make sure that each step along the way, we're getting a little bit better. Because that progress, that incremental progress, that's like the compound interest of business, is it really starts to become impressive over time.
Yeah, those are some words to live by right there. That's a nice place to end. I love that. I have a friend who talks about that, about just trying to be a little bit every day. And then, he's like, then by the end of the year, if you get like 1% better every day, or maybe not 1%, but if you get a little bit better every day, by the end of a year, a decade, you'll be better than the previous year and the previous decade. So It can be overwhelming to be like, think about where you are and where you want to be, and it can look like a really big leap, and just to try to, like, it's a one day at a time, right? I think that's all we can do. All we can do as farmers and as people. So, all right. Well, on that note, where can people find you online or on social media or wherever you want people to look you up?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have an Instagram profile. It's just Bear Creek Organic Farm. We got a Facebook page. It's Bear Creek Organic Farm. We don't have any fancy managers for that. It's just me and Ann. So we always encourage people to reach out. And if they've got questions, to message us. And if we're delayed, that's because we've got a busy life and family and farm. But if you get a reply, it's going to be one of us. Like, that's who's doing it. So, I mean, could somebody else do it better? Maybe, but we try really hard to put content out there that resonates, and we just hope that people see stuff. So yeah, if anything piques people's interest, I always hope they'll reach out. The other cool thing, that since we opened a farm and we're open 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, we have gotten to be visited by so many cool farmers and business people over the years. And I just love when they come and we pass each other and they introduce themselves, and then I can show them around the farm or whatever. Like, I love that part of people being able to land here and host them. So they can find us online. And if they ever find themselves in the neighborhood, I really hope that they'll stop by and introduce themselves, because we're really more than glad to share everything that we have going on to help anybody else out.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I enjoy your social media feed. It's very authentic. Lots of pictures of your cats. That's how I know your cats' names are frickin' Frack. Yeah, so I encourage people to follow you over on Instagram to, get the lowdown of what's going on in the farm. So, all right. Well, Brian, you're awesome. Really just enjoyed this conversation, and, hearing about how your business has grown over the, decade or so since I read that article in Growing for Market magazine. So thanks so much for sharing with us about it. And I enjoyed it. I'm sure our audience will.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Growing for Market podcast. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider giving us a follow and a rating or a review. It really helps others find the podcast. For more tips and tricks from farmer to farmer, check out our magazine at growingformarket.com. Whether you're a commercial grower or just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market magazine for the nitty-gritty of growing, marketing, and the business of market farming. We publish 10 issues per year with articles written by experienced farmers on topics ranging from tools and techniques to farm business operations and marketing. If you've been listening to the Growing for Market podcast and haven't yet checked out Growing for Market magazine, we've made a change so you can try the magazine for free. We've added a free month to the beginning of all first-time subscriptions. Try out the digital or paper magazine for a month, and if it's not for you, cancel within 28 days and you'll never even get billed. All subscriptions get you a year of the magazine, plus 150 downloadable back issues from the last 15 years and over 1,700 archived articles. With digital subscriptions starting at just $39 a year, head on over to growingformarket.com and subscribe today to benefit from over 3 decades of writing by farmers, for farmers, in Growing for Market magazine.